Good afternoon. This is Mala from Hearts&Minds Development Center. Thank you for joining us, Being Whole, Being Me, Series 84. So happy New Year. I know I went missing for a bit. I just needed to breathe, and I think the new year has just started for me because I'm ready to rock again. So we are on episode 84. It's our third year. We're very, very grateful for some of you have journeyed with us. Special thank to Gerald Fernandez. Good afternoon, Mallory. He says, I'm glad to be back for the first series of 2023. All the best. Yeah, I need it. So special thanks to Gerald, who has actually walked with us almost at every step, encouraging us through almost 80 over episodes. While we are looking at ending it at 100, so I hope you would, put aside your 16 weeks, upcoming 16 weeks to meet our amazing guests. I would say this about every guest, that every guest is special, but today's guest is very special because he made me read his book that I would have never read if I don't know him. And because I was forced to read his book, The Malaysian Dilemma. It's been a pretty emotional journey in the last 1.5 weeks that I've been reading this book. And before I bring Soong, I know Soong, I find it difficult to call him Soong, but I know Soong as Anne's husband. So I'm going to thank Anne, the beautiful wife whom you would have met in one of our shows, for marrying Soong, for living home and making this our home and serving this nation, because that's how I know her. And to have stood by Soong during what I would say the most not challenging, daunting times. So before I bring in Soong, I want to just read from his book that probably took away my sleep last night. He says, this is on page 117, his 445 days under Upsalala. I was hoping to read some negative stuff and get angry, but I couldn't. But he said, the most daunting prospect was the unpredictable length and conditions of ISA detention and the breakdown of law and rationality when innocent citizens like me could be arrested under that law. But most of all, we thought of our poor little ones who would not understand what was happening. Being a very involved parent who took an equal share in responsibility for the children, we would miss each other terribly, that was certain. Truly, there was no time for love that evening. As we enveloped by an electrifying anticipation and apprehension, I had tried to say a meaningful goodbye to my 6-year-old Huai and 2-year-old Bihua without saying goodbye. As Anne and I waited in the dark of the foreboding night, be brave, we kept assuring each other. Please help me welcome Soong so that we can also be brave.
Thanks, Mala.
Thank you. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for writing this book. And for those who have not seen, this is the 40th book, and I'm still trying to get my first book out. So, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for saying yes. Thank you for writing this book. And we have a couple of people who have come in to say hello. Gerald has said hello. I think Anne is here. Anne is saying hello too. Anne is Soong's wife, very important person in the book too, and Regina. So, Soong, how are you?
Great. I'm so pleased to be in your series. Just looking at the number of people you've had in the series, and I'm truly honored to be part of it.
Oh, okay. I feel like I'm going to be part of the Malaysian history, just sitting beside you, holding your book and talking to you today. So I got this book. I am just very curious, right? Because when you first, handed me this book, I've always been very cautious with you. Whenever I read your Facebook, both you and Ed, I'm like, these guys are so political, and I'm a political idiot, right? So the first thing that came to my mind is really, you made me reflect what does it mean to be Malaysian? Because the first part of your book, when you read it, right, when I was reading it, you were, asking questions like when you went to, when you went overseas to study, right? How you were expected it's a better life and to stay there, right?
That's
And
right.
when I read that, very easily relate to you because it has never occurred to me to leave Malaysia. Never, right? So people have asked me, not that I had opportunities, but it has never occurred to me like there was even an option. So I could, on one hand, feel the Malaysian spirit, which is very difficult to explain because I'm nothing else but Malaysian, right? But I think in your case, I think it was very interesting because you had that opportunity, right? And you came back, and then of course we had this big Ops Lalang and your whole colorful life of going through various adversity, where it felt like you're being chased away over and over again. Well, you're such a stubborn Malaysian, right? So I can see, you are an academician, you're an educator, you're an author, but deep down, if I ask you, who are you? How would you define yourself in terms of your identity?
Definitely that I would identify myself as a Malaysian, because I think somebody like me and you, because we are born here, you from the day you are born, you breathe Malaysian air, you walk the Malaysian soil, etc. That's very that very deep seated identification with the country as a national is very strong, and that's why when I went to Britain, London, uh, it was you don't lose it, you know. I'm not sure whether it was at that time I wasn't very politicized yet, but still, like I said, I would meet a stranger in a pub or on the street, and they would assume that a foreigner coming to Britain, this where the sun never sets on the British Empire, would never want to leave Britain. I wanted to prove him wrong, and so there was a very that could only have been a very patriotic kind of feeling you get, and it's the same with. But sometimes I wonder whether it is just that, and that's why when you qualify for nationality in any country, the space of time that you spend in the country is also important.
Mm,
And then, for example, I was very proud of my father. For example, my father was born here, but he spent some time in China when he was young. But when I went back with him in the 90s, and he was talking to our relatives there as referring to China as your country. I was very proud of him that he had accepted that he had always been Malaysian. And then when you look at somebody like Anne, my wife, was British, but she's lived in Malaysia for what? How many years? 30, 40 years, and that surely qualify her for nationality as well if she wants to. But I'm sure she's like me. You would feel that you are a national of the country that you were born. That is the strongest, and that is to me that's what a Malaysian is. In fact, when we were young, we felt that we were Malayans. Mala, you are part of the young generation, so you say you identify yourself as a Malaysian. But people of my generation, born
right.
in baby boomers, before independence, we identified ourselves as Malayans. And I was born in Batu Pahat in Johor, where Singapore was very near. In 1.5 hours we could be in Singapore. Our relatives were in Singapore. We hardly had any relatives before our brothers, siblings, and cousins went to university. We seldom came to Kuala Lumpur because Kuala Lumpur was that 5-hour journey through the hills of Negeri Sembilan before you reach Kuala Lumpur. So at that time, Singapore was very much part of Malaya,
Right.
and Sabah and Sarawak were not part of Malaya at that time. So
Sure.
we identified ourselves more as Malayans rather than Malaysians. But Now, after what happened in history, of course, we all identify as Malaysians now. But surely that growing up, being born in this country was the most important part of all we went through in our childhood, our school life, our primary school life, our secondary school life, our working life, etc. That's our neighbors, our friends, etc. from all ethnicities. That's what makes us Malaysians. And I
Yeah.
think
So if I asked you, because I think the more difficult it is to describe what it means to be a Malaysian, I think it's more deeply, unconsciously, subconsciously rooted.
yeah,
I think.
yeah.
But I'm still going to ask you. So if I ask you now, what does it mean to you to be a Malaysian? What does it mean for you? Like how? Yeah. So when you say I'm a Malaysian, right? So when I travel, especially when I go to India, right, I'm often mistaken, or even here sometimes, because when I'm in a sari, people usually ask me whether I'm from India, right? And my heart will jump out and say I'm a Malaysian, right? And even more proud when I'm not here in Malaysia, right? But really, what does it mean, to you when you say you're a Malaysian? What is the Malaysian spirit that you can help us see, feel, or touch?
I think it's everything that we eat and breathe and espouse to. Like even and I would go as far as to say that if our country was invaded or occupied by Japan during the war, British colonialism during colonial times, etc., or if even in the modern times, for example, when Mahathir used to be the bête noire of the West, if the US had come to take over Malaysia because they didn't like Mahathir, for example, I would have defended Malaysia against an invading imperialist power that wants to create some kind of regime change in this country, and that is ultimately what a Malaysian patriot would do, and that is what Malaysian patriots did during the war against the Japanese, the thousands that died, and somebody like Sibyl Kartikesu in Perak, people like that. These are patriots, not just Malaysians or Malayans. They were patriots, and that is ultimately what it is. Otherwise, proclaiming yourself as a Malaysian, I think, is good enough.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm just curious, right? Because you've seen so much that we probably some of us wouldn't have heard, right? I was talking to my kids about this book, and I said this is a must read for all of us. Is what I said, right? And as we were chatting and laughing about making it compulsory reading, I think I grew up with the Malaysian history sejarah, right? Having said that, I think there are a lot of things that was written in this book that makes me feel differently to being a Malaysian, right? And you would have seen people transitioning, because sometimes you reading is one thing, but having experiencing it is a different thing. Patriotism, right? So for me, I think my sense of really, feeling like a real true Malaysian only came in the last 10 years with a lot of this political unrest, where I started to question what's my stand. So I that's how I am, right? I have taken it for granted. As much as I love love Malaysia and I wouldn't go anywhere else, but I wasn't so aware, right, of many things. Now, if you look at transitions, right, what do you see happening in terms of how the different generations are expressing their patriotic feeling for Malaysia? What do you see?
Or patriotic feelings, because that has to be proven, ultimately. But it's difficult to see patriotism really, a politician waving a flag and etc. That's not patriotism to me. And how much our young people during the Reformasi period in the late 90s, etc. We saw a lot of that, and even recently we've seen a lot of young people in expressing themselves, etc. But
Yeah.
how patriotic they are, etc. For example, it's difficult to mention names, but there were people. There was some very very good activists and even chroniclers. I remember during the Reformasi period, and he was a Malay activist actually. His girlfriend or his partner was Indian, but he was such a good chronicler during Reformasi, the demonstration in the streets, etc. And he used to it was the early days of the internet, and I used to like to read his chronicles of what happened in the street the day before, etc. And then he's emigrated.
Right.
Emigrated because he has a easier life for both of them to be in a foreign country than here. So what about the others? How do you prove your patriotism? It's very difficult to say, really.
Yeah. No, I'm not looking for proof, but I
What
must
is
say,
Mala, what is interesting is that when I wrote my book, I was using statistics from 2010, and at that time, the statistics said that 1 million Malaysians had emigrated, but only recently, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, we had newer statistics from 2016 that said that 2 million Malaysians had emigrated. So, I
and
mean,
many more waiting,
that is
waiting,
right. So,
waiting.
a lot of these new emigres, I presume, are young people, quite young people, rather who's trying to seek a life, or young parents who want some education for their children.
Yeah.
So, how do we judge young people's patriotism? Is very difficult to say.
Yeah.
Some of them, a lot of activists we know during the Reformasi and after, when they had the chance, became politicians. And today,
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think I was curious to see, because I do think that my sense of patriotism comes when I can't stand anything about my country being ridiculed by anybody. That's when I know I feel for my country. Number one. I mean, you can laugh at the things that's in public, but you will not do it to me. All right. And I do remember when we traveled and we were, some people thought it was funny to make fun of one MDB and stuff like that. I said, yeah, but that was a person that doesn't represent my country, so differentiate it, right? So that's one for me. In fact, in a recent concert, I think there was this big A.R. Rahman concert. For me, yeah, when Siti Nurhaliza sang the Tamil song, the
yeah,
way the Malaysian gave her a standing ovation, for me, that was part of feeling the sisterhood, brotherhood of being a Malaysian. So it comes, or, when, you see someone of a different race within Malaysia being ridiculed and you're getting irritated because we are one. For me,
yeah.
those are parts of, really feeling like a Malaysian that comes through, right? Now, you have
Sorry.
a whole, yeah.
No, what you mentioned about people ridiculing your country, I remember that was when Anthony Burgess, the famous writer, had made a television film about Malaysia. He came over
Yes,
here, and it was very patronizing. He was trying to ridicule our society, etc. And I written a letter to the Guardian, which was published in the Guardian, and I never thought any of it. But during my detention, the special branch brought it up, and I said, "Look, it proves that I'm a patriot, but
yeah,
you're trying to
exactly.
make me out not to be one." But that is exactly what I mean. When I was a student in Britain, any kind of evidence of people ridiculing your country, you stand up for your country, and that is what I did.
Nice. Thank you. So I'm just going to say hello to a couple of people. You would be very happy to know Mr. Chu Hokbun is actually here. He never
Oh,
comes to my show. He's come for your show.
yeah.
Yeah, I know, Gerald, you have a very important question. I'm going to hold that because that's a tough one to answer. And I know Soong will have what sort of answer Soong will have. Chiu asks, has the Malaysian spirit diminished over past generation? We see more racial comments or statements by individuals or parties. Is this fear or mediocrity driven? So I don't know whether, yeah, would you like to address this, Soong?
Has the Malaysian spirit diminished? Very difficult to answer because I have the advantage of having lived through seven decades, and I can see that the so-called Malaysian spirit or Malayan spirit during the early days. Has it diminished? I really can't understand. I can't answer that because would you say that the increasing numbers of emigration is proof that there's no Malaysian spirit? It's difficult to say. I don't see any Malaysian spirit, for example, when I see politicians making stupid comments, So I really find it difficult to answer that question. We see more racial comments. Do we see more or less? Oh, that could have been worse. We talk about racial comments, etc. There are the innocuous ones, and there are the more toxic ones, and there are the really horrible ones that we saw, for example, at the Jalan Muda Stadium just before Operation Lalang, that kind of stuff, And then there were horrible racial incidents just after the Second World War. Many millennials and younger Malaysians don't know that. But in Batu Pahat, for example, where Chew comes from, maybe his parents may have told him about that. What happened after the Second World War? There was our first people from Batu Pahat, our first experience of the so-called racial riots. So. Quite difficult to answer this question. Maybe different people would have different answers.
Sure.
Sorry, Chu.
No, it's okay. So, there are things that Soong doesn't know, which means he has to write another book. I do think that I'm not too sure. So I wanted to just share this since Chu has asked so that I can sound clever, right? When I get into Clubhouse, there's a group that gathers those who are working overseas. All right. And this is the talent drained, I suppose, that Gerald is asking about. What I'm hearing from them is that they wish they can come back. They're just there for better opportunities. And the feeling of wanting to come home, missing home is real for people. The young people, these are the very, very young people who have gone for better job opportunities, who have studied, who have scholarships and stuff like that. So they're just there for opportunities. This is from the Clubhouse conversation that I've listened to. And even people, my own friends who have settled down because they decided to leave the country for their children's education, they always look at, okay, if it's not for my kids, I'm going to retire at home, right? And I think that tells us what home means. And of course, Regina is echoing that by saying, for me, I've traveled to many countries, but every time the plane returns and enters Malaysian airspace, I feel happy that I am coming home. Thank you, Reg, for that. Panir is saying, wow, Malar, yes. How did you catch this big fish? No. I caught the bigger fish, which was the wife. This one is come tag along big fish. Great topic, amazing guest. I totally agree with you. I'm going to go to Gerald's question before we spend a bit more time getting to know you. Gerald says Malaysia is a great country. No matter where we travel to, we always want to get home. I guess many left not because of the country, but due to the people governing the country and various policies. Irrespective, I love Malaysia. Thank God you said that, okay? Now, how do we avoid more Malaysian talent leaving the country? Now, before Soong answers, I want to tell you, Gerald, buy this book. All the answers are in this book. But having said that, Soong, can you give him a quick answer?
How do you? A very good comparison with what you're saying about people leaving the country. Is what is happening in China today. All the number of intellectuals who had left China to study abroad, especially in the US, in decades ago, etc., are slowly going back now. Partly because of the racism that is in the US in the West, but more in the US, and then this serious stuff, the kind of racism there, and the China, more opportunities in China now because it's growing. And so that I think that's a quite a useful comparison with Malaysia. What can happen, how Malaysia can develop in the future, and that is what people like us are put in this country to do. We talk about how we can improve this country, blah blah blah, the democracy, how we can achieve a high income society, that kind of stuff. Once we can create the conditions where our millennials, etc., who have left the country can come back, apart from the material benefits that will accrue to our country developing properly. There are many ways in which it hasn't developed properly in this country. It's very clear to see. But once that develops, once we have democracy, once we have equality, you'd be surprised. Something simple like equality. I always ask for an equality act to be put in place in this country, an equality act, and an equality commission that is part of the Human Rights Commission. Like we have Suhakam. Instead of just a Human Rights Commission, call it an Equality and Human Rights Commission, like they have in Britain. And once the economic conditions are upgraded, once the democratic atmosphere is improved, and once you have equality, etc., one would think that most of these people who have left the country will want to come back, because like you said. And so these are important conditions but to ask our young people or those who have left the country to seek for greener pastures, for example, when they face many have faced. In fact, we middle class people are more fortunate than the B40, for example.
Yeah.
The marginalized people in this country, who are victims of the racial policies in this country. They don't have a choice. Whereas we, middle class people, have a choice, and that's where the people who have emigrated to Australia, to the West, etc., have done. It's very difficult to tell them not to, because they got, even the people who went to what they call jumped aeroplane. In Chinese, they say 跳飞机, You go to Korea and Japan and you jump aeroplane, which means you don't come back. You try and be an illegal immigrant in those countries. In Australia, I took a cab the other day from the airport, and the cab driver had been thrown out of Australia because he had jumped aeroplane in Australia. But the immigration in Australia told him that he could come back in 5 years, try again in 5 years' time. So that it's very difficult to tell them not to, because the opportunity is there. They find the opportunities here. We can, because we somehow get a job, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've asked myself whether, when I see my other friends who have, moved on and, really having a good life, right? A better opportunities. I've asked myself, whether I have asked myself that question. The answer has always been, I love the people that I have around me. So I think I need to bring the whole Jing Bang if I want to be happy anywhere else. Now, we have two comments coming through. I think Pete Yuen Chok says, the modern society has encouraged individualism rather than patriotism. No wonder people tended to look for a greener pasture nowadays. So that's what, I don't know whether you know him or her, Pete Yuen Chok says. Thank you very much. I would agree with you, because as I'm reading your comment, and as I was reading the book, I was asking how much of the Malaysian spirit we are passing on to our children, except for Merdeka Day, where we put on the flag, and my kids are going to a non-Malaysian school, and so they're not getting the best of the Malaysian history. So it bothers me, and I agree with you, but I hope I don't teach my children individualism, right? Now, Lim Zhao says, pretext of Malaya is alluded by the late Anthony Burgess. It reminded us of the late Han Suyin, who vigorously promoted vernacular education. Do we promote the understanding of various ethnic groups? What's your take on this, sir?
First, can I talk about the last comment?
Sure.
And I'd like to point out that we shouldn't be too hasty to say that people who have left the country are not patriotic, because that's what I did when I finished my A levels in 1969. I left the country. In the old days, you say to seek your fortune, with a bundle or the stick in a bundle, and it's like to expand your experience, and for me at that time, I didn't have any opportunities as well. I had to go up abroad, but that didn't mean that I was unpatriotic. That's one point that I wanted to. So a lot of our millennials or young people who have gone abroad, don't judge them too quickly to say that they're not patriotic or they're individuals. I was individualistic when I was a young man, but I didn't mean that I was not patriotic.
Oh,
That's right.
nice.
Yeah, that's right. The modern society. Oh no, I haven't come to another question after this.
Yeah. The next question is Lin Zhao's question, which is
about Anthony Burgess, etc. Yeah. And Han Suyin, I'm a very proud owner of 2 letters from Han Suyin, the famous writer. And at a time when I was having a debate with the intellectuals in this country about the whether we should have Merdeka University or not during the 80s. Do we promote the understanding of various ethnic groups? I think we do. I think the right to mother tongue education does not preclude the understanding of various ethnic groups. And I think now many of our, for example, many Malays and Indians are going to Chinese schools and vice versa. So there's no reason why we should not promote the understanding of various ethnic groups. We can have, for example, what I've always advocated, educational precincts. So that when you have different schools, you can have a education precinct where you all share the same high tech IT labs, high tech, the best stadium, the best theaters, the best libraries, etc. There's no reason why these can be shared, but then there's no reason why we can't have, because in Malaysia is if you have to be proud of something, we're proud of our mother tongue schools in this country.
Okay, thank you. I like the way that you're helping us to think through this, that we might be jumping very quickly into conclusions, number one. Number two, I think we also go through our own growth space as an individual first, right? Because our identity, we begin to figure out who we are, right? And Pit Yuen Chok again comes to say, my term of individualism is more lean to self-interest. Thank you. We got it. Oh, Mr. Chu has come back again. He's your fan, man. Miss the good old days where there are no house grills and we freely walk into neighbors for free meals and under the cooking tent when there are kanduris. Well, that's how Chu filled up his stomach. Played football, kaki ayam, and baling sleeper. Our kids missed out the Malaysian way of life. I shouldn't bring my family problems here, but Chu's the one who liked grills. But never mind, moving on. So, when we looking at, what it means to be Malaysian, you've given us a lot of thoughts and ideas to think about being Malaysian, right? Now, your book is, why did you write this book called Malaysian Dilemma? Why did you write it?
Well, first of all, it was my journey, my memoirs. I've got a good habit of always chronicling my experiences, and that's why I've written so many books. Is because after every experience, I write a book, so that before you have a chance to ask me what was Kamunting like, I want to write a book so that I don't explain
right.
And it's there. And it's also for myself. I think people, when we were small, when we were in primary school, our teachers at that time were very good. They made us write our journal. I don't know if teachers today do that with their school kids, but we were taught to write our journal. And so that habit is, I think, it's a very good habit that our children and our pupils and our students should always have. Never mind those who become university students, etc. They should still have a habit of writing your chronicles. And so writing my memoir when I've reached the ripe old age of 73, I think is a very opportune time to put down. It's like looking back and seeing with any lessons and recording it for my children and for posterity, so that's why I wrote the book. And why is it called the Malaysian? It could have been it was originally a very long, sprawling memoir, of all my experiences, but it had to be cut down because I thought, what was the point of just writing your life in great detail? It may have literary worth, unless it was structured in a certain way. But I thought that the theme of my life, especially since coming back to this country in 1982, was trying to resolve this so-called Malaysian dilemma, because I think it's a dilemma. Interesting that just before I published the book, I was talking about political dilemma of having two fronts that are so alike. Now these two fronts after the G15 have actually united, and we don't have two fronts anymore. So I mean, what kind of So there's a political dilemma. There's a cultural dilemma. When we came back to this country in the 80s, lion dances were not allowed. The national culture policy. So there was a cultural dilemma at that time, and that is why lion dances are so popular today because they tried to ban it. Because at that time lion dances were on their way out because the people got a bit bored with the drums and all that kind of stuff. But because the government said no lion dances sprouted up all over the country. And I'm very glad to see today there are non-Chinese, Malays, Indians who are taking part in lion dance as well. And then there are, the economic. I think the economic dilemma is one of the biggest challenge we face today. And whether this so-called unity government is going to resolve it, I'm not so sure. But in my book, my manifesto, I try to tease out some of the areas where I think that we can look at. For example, the privatization, the neoliberal capitalism that Mahathir tried to implement when he became prime minister in 1981, and he was copying Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan in America. It's actually selling off our family fortune. Many of our nationalized industries at the time, electricity, energy, that kind of stuff was being privatized. And so these are things that we need to look at if we want to, the economic dilemma that we have to cross before we can.
Yeah.
So my book is mainly to not just to put these together, but in my work, in my experience in the last 30-40 years I've been in this country, has actually been through all these different areas of Malaysian life, whether it's like people before profits, that kind of stuff.
When I was reading about what I'm getting is very much, you are, on one hand you talk about inequality, but at the same time you're also bringing up the data and what is really happening with other people, which is why it is not so straightforward. Nothing is so straightforward, which is why there's a dilemma. And like, how do I decide? How do I prioritize? How do I choose? Is what I'm getting over and over again, right? But having said that, right? If you think about the legacy, I mean, you've written 40 books. Surely it takes passion to write these books, right? What is the legacy that you want to leave behind for Malaysia? Because you've paid a very high price compared to most other Malaysians, I feel, by coming, by being here and continuing to being here. So, what is the legacy that you probably either have thought of, but why are you in this difficult journey? Why did you take this road less traveled? So, what's your legacy?
Well, first of all, it's a bit presumptuous to talk about your own legacy. This legacy is something for other people to say. I won't talk about my legacy because but what I wanted to do, ever since I was a kid, I was in school, in the secondary school, in A levels, etc., was always trying to be, It's like seeking truth.
Mm.
Always seeking out for the truth, and that's what all great religions teach us as well. And even when I was in secondary school, when we had debates in class, etc., it shouldn't be a debate to score points. It should be a debate about trying to see what the truth is. And I remember during my very beginnings in secondary school was when the Vietnam War was in full rage, in the late 60s. And look at it. When we were in school in the 60s, Malaysia was supporting the United States against and supporting South Vietnam against North Vietnam, supporting the US Vietnam War, that kind of stuff. So the debates we had in school, in secondary school, it's not a debate to score points, because ultimately a war like the Vietnam War and the Ukraine War today involves people dying, and an aggressive power and the victims of that aggressive power. So always seeking the truth has been the propulsion for my life and my work, really. So and then when I was studying for my PhD, I'm looking at this question of, is it class or is it race? When you look at the in the academic world in the West, or here anyway, they like to look at Malaysia from a point of view of race, as if because having different races in the country necessarily means that there'll be trouble. There's going to be conflict.
Mm.
And then on the other side, we have these leftists who say race doesn't count, it's only class that matters. The working class gets together and then there will be unity.
Right.
So my object, my hypothesis in my PhD thesis was to find that intersection between race and class, and to find a way in which. So that was my first object with this one. Oh no, where's that? My PhD thesis was on class and communalism in Malaysia.
Right.
That was my first book, published by Z Press of London. And so it went on from there, always trying to find out the truth about a certain matter and how we look at issues. And then when I look at May 13 here is my most successful book, actually. And Gerak Budaya has made quite good profit out of this book. And it sold more than 60,000 since it came out in 2007.
Right.
And why did I write that book? It was again to cut through all this nonsense about how May 13 erupted because Chinese and Malays couldn't get on, so they naturally had a riot, and people were killed. Was it that simple? So I went to the Public Records Office, the archives in Britain, to look at what actually happened. So that has been the story of my life since I came back to this country.
Nice. So what I'm hearing, Soong, is that it's really you keep seeking the truth, and you are helping us by writing. You are also helping us to see the truth that you have found. Right. We only have about 10 more minutes, so I'm going to push it a little bit. I have two very important questions that I need. Okay. Now, how fulfilled do you feel with your journey? Because it's been a tough journey. So now looking back in last whatever number of years where there's been so many adversities and the price you've paid, right now at this moment, tell us, how fulfilled do you feel with your life journey?
I can't really complain. until something happens. When I mustn't speak too soon because when I was detained in 1987, I had only written. I think one of the books that I was detained for was called "Polarization in Malaysia: The Root Causes." That was published by K Das Inc. My good friend K Das. And ever since I was detained, I have, like you said, I've published much more, including books like May 13, the special branch, and the powers that we don't like. So I mustn't be too. I mustn't jump the gun and say how fulfilled I am. I mean, I can still.
Well, right. We're talking about now looking, not looking forward, but you can look back and look at your life, and having gone through so many adversities, how fulfilled do you feel? And if yes, what fulfills you?
Uh, I feel fulfilled in the sense that I've succeeded in publishing my books. I've stayed the course in Suaram, defending human rights for at least how many years since the end of Operation Alarm, since 1989, about 30 years. I feel fulfilled from what I've done in the Chinese schools, for example, and in fact, I organized the first mother tongue education of Malaysia's ethnic minorities. It's not here, somewhere up there. So I feel fulfilled in that sense. For example, my children went to the Chinese schools, a secondary school in secondary Chinese schools, and my job when I joined the Chinese education movement was to make sure that their school leaving certificate, the Unified Examination Certificate, is recognized all over the world. So that was my first job when I came back to Malaysia, and I feel fulfilled in the sense that I've done that. And today I understand there are more than 400 universities in the world that recognize the UEC now, except for Malaysia. Malaysia still doesn't recognize it. So fulfilled in that sense, I feel fulfilled that I published May 13 to expose the flimsy.
Thank you. It's wonderful to hear that. One very personal question. I think Ops Lalang was traumatic. I read it and I feel the trauma, right? Do you, right now at this moment, have you healed from the hurts that happened to you first and your family in Ops Lalang?
Yeah. I don't feel the hurt too much to my personal being, but I feel more the hurt to my children and my wife, what they went through. For my children were just growing up. My son, I never got to go to the school. My son's first day in school, that I look forward to. That was during my 60 days of solitary confinement. So that is and freedom is not just another word, freedom means I felt freedom very much when I was, for example, when I was in Cambodia. I had to go to the hospital, and you asked to be handcuffed and on the bus, and you're traveling from the bus from Cambodia detention camp to the hospital, and you're looking down from the bus at these mama stalls that started along the road, and you just wonder, my goodness, how I wish I could be sitting in the mama stall drinking, a cup of teh tarik. That, to me, that is the freedom that is stolen from you. So, and apart from not being able to be with your family and your children.
Right. I'm going to read something, and then I'm going to ask you, hopefully, one last question. I'm actually reading from page 119. This is another one that stepped my inner being. Where you talk about family visits, right? Your first 60 days of solitary confinement, and you say family visits were a high point when they were allowed, but the very first visit was certainly the most memorable and suspenseful. Seeing Anne again after the long week following the dreaded dawn was a tremendous relief. When we embraced, it was as if a chasm had been bridged. Before 30 minutes were up, my little ones appeared. They were bemused by the whole scene, and even more so since they had just been roused from sleep that afternoon. It was so wonderful to see Hua Ying and Bi Hua again. and it was difficult to hide the emotions which welled up. I pretended to act as normally as I could in order not to alarm them too much, although they were acutely aware of the heavy presence of the special branch personnel. We hugged, and just as they were starting to come to terms with the fact that I was there with them, it was the end of the visit. I cuddled them as much as I could before I was led away, an abrupt end to our first family visit. Now, and I read all the parts where Anne would come and stay in, just for a 40 minutes. So what I really admired was the kind of strength you and Anne put up and tried to normalize it. But your kids will know it was not normal, number one. And I think there were other many other events post your release, where you were totally continue to be tormented. How has this impacted your children, their trauma beyond the 2 years? I think there's a lot more beyond the 2 years, right?
Yeah.
The kids would have seen what you've done for the country, you seeking the truth, them having to be part of paying for the truth. How has it impacted them? And I think this is a very important question, because I think as leaders, not just, we're not talking politically, but as leaders, we don't realize that anything that you do to a parent affects the child. So tell us.
Yeah, it's interesting that both me and Anne are very, very politically conscious. We studied social science, etc. And on hindsight, we must have talked so much about this kind of stuff in front of our kids that that none of them are in the kind of social science framework that we are in. They've gone to pursue their own things, which are completely nothing to do with this. But at the same time, I think they are very. I think they are very well prepared. For example, if I were detained again, for example, I'm sure I'm very confident that they know what to do in terms of mounting a campaign, to defend me.
How do they feel as children?
You have to ask them. I think Huang is on the line. You could ask him how he has, because you need to put them on and ask them how it has affected them.
Sean, if you're here, tell us how it is. I mean, really, because I know you would have educated your kids, and that's the structure and the process and the policies and being educated, right? Knowing your rights and how to do that. But I'm really, really, curious to know how it has shaped them. Not, I mean, it's shaped you while they're doing well, but the hurt to watch your parent going through all of this, yeah, and for a good cause. So, Sean, if you're in, tell us something if you want, if you're okay to share. But otherwise, that's something I'd like to know. I think basically to see what's the how it has impacted your children. So, with that, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. He says, I think any sort of trauma at a young age leaves a lasting impression. Sean, this may not be the right space, but I think, if you put it down in the simplest way you can, it would be nice. But otherwise, maybe we need to bring you into a conversation. And thank you so much for saying this, Sean. And this is really, I suppose the answer I was seeking, to say that, it is, in your patriotism, and being a Malaysian, I want to thank you because, you've given a lot to us. And I'm really sorry that you had to endure this for us. And I'm grateful. I will tell my children this. And I want to thank your children too for having to put up with this, because it was a lot. It was a lot. So,
Yeah, but to put this all in perspective, when
right.
when I was first sent to Kamunting detention camp,
Mm,
my first roommate in Kamun
mm,
detention camp, his
mm,
name was Go Ming Liang.
mm.
he had the biggest, brightest smile you could ever see on anybody. And he told us that he had been detained for 16 years.
I know, I read.
16 years. So that puts into perspective what I went through, 445 days, and what he went through. 16 years. Can you imagine that? And that was the terror of the ISA, because I've always been in human rights. I was a human rights defender when I was a student in Britain, and we were fighting for the release of Professor Syed Hussein Ali, Dr. Bosuka in Singapore, Chia Taipo, etc. And all of them had been detained for so many years, and that was the terror of the ISA. And so when Lo Ming Liang told me he had been detained for 16 years, can you imagine the trauma I felt at that time wasn't what I'd been through, but the thought of being detained for 16 years was the real terror of the ISA.
Yeah. And I need to read more about him, because when I saw the 16 years and then the way you said he was in terms of, how calm and, how he smiled, I thought, whoa, that's a part of history I definitely don't know. All right, before we end, Nirmala, Dr. Nirmala Bhaskaran says, good day all. It's great to see you back in action on Friday afternoon, Malar. I just managed to tune in, shall listen in later. Thank you, Dr. Kua, for your wonderful, courageous sharing of your life's journey. God bless you for your strength. Thank you. And Nirmala, just remember, get his book. Don't listen to don't watch this, just get this book. So thank you very much. Panir says, my personal thanks to Dr. Kua for his contribution to the nation building, has been bold and passionate about building a better Malaysia. Yes, thank you, Panir, for coming through and putting up this comment. So one last, if you had one thing you want to tell all Malaysians, one message you want to tell to people who will be listening or watching this later, what's the one message you have for all of us?
I will say seek truth from facts. I think that's a lot of times people seek truth from narratives. There's this narrative and that narrative and in that conversation, etc. But it's important that you seek the truth from facts.
Okay, seek truth from facts, not narratives. And you're asking us to take the road less traveled like you. So thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. Love you. Okay. Again, thank you for saying yes. Very, very grateful to have you as Anne's husband. I must ask Anne, what's wrong with you? Why did you marry this man? But that's a separate thing. Thank you. God bless you until we meet again. Stay blessed, stay safe, and stay wonderful. Love you.
Love you.
Oh, he said I love you. Okay. Someone said he loves me. Right. With that, for those who have joined us today, Sean, Nirmala, Chew, Hopun Panir, Pete Yuen Chok, Lin Zhao, and did I miss Regina, of course, and Gerald. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Not sure whether enjoy is the word, but I would say it is a life-changing moment for me. So have a great week ahead until I see you with another guest next week, another exciting guest actually, a celebrity, I must say, in our Being Whole, Being Me series. Help us with, subscribe to our YouTube and our Spotify if you just want to listen. Until I meet you next week, continue to stay safe and, maybe be more conscious about being Malaysian and shout out loud to the world. Take care until I see you next week. Bye. Signing off, this is Malan from Hearts&Minds Development Center.